In this video, I'm going to discuss one skill that every dietetic intern should work on to provide effective nutrition education. When it comes to providing nutrition education, every dietetic intern needs to ask questions before giving instructions. Doing this will result in less time wasted for both parties and a higher likelihood that the patient learns something new. According to the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, nutrition education is the reinforcement of basic or essential nutrition-related knowledge. Simply put, it's the delivery of information. This is different from nutrition counseling, which is defined by the establishment of specific goals and the creation of an individualized plan for achieving them. In the clinical setting, nutrition education is requested and provided for a number of reasons. This includes, but is not limited to, the promotion of a general healthful lifestyle, guidance for a specific disease state like diabetes, heart failure, or chronic kidney disease, preparing a patient for home nutrition support, instructions for texture modification with dysphagia, and management of symptoms like nausea and vomiting. This is generally given as a combination of printed handout materials and verbal instruction. As a dietetic intern, leading a one-on-one nutrition education can be a daunting task. First of all, you're usually speaking to a complete stranger, so going into it, you rarely have an idea of what the patient knows about nutrition. Then you're also pressed for time, which is especially true in the inpatient setting, where you may only have 10 to 15 minutes to complete the session before you need to move on to the rest of your patient load. Finally, there's a decent chance you'll never see the patient again, so you may only have one shot to make an impression. In the beginning, I think it's tempting to want to give the patient the most comprehensive overview possible. To do this, you introduce the topic. Then you move on to explaining what they need to do, followed by why they need to do it, and how they can get it done. After this, you conclude the interview by asking if they have any questions. Although this strategy accomplishes the goal of delivering information, I find that it's quite ineffective. Patients with a chronic condition typically have been given nutrition education before, searched for it themselves, or know somebody with the same condition. Furthermore, most patients aren't interested in just being a witness to everything you know. They want to do at least half of the talking, have the opportunity to ask questions, and voice concerns with the hope that you can help them. Thus, you really don't want to start an education session like this. I was asked to give you nutrition information for heart failure. We want you to follow a low-sodium diet when you go home. Foods that are high in sodium include processed meats like bacon, and so on. A much better way to start the session is like this. I was asked to give you nutrition information for heart failure. Have you ever received nutrition information for heart failure before? In the first scenario, you're keeping the ball entirely in your court. The patient could have learned about the sodium content of foods a dozen times, but you wouldn't know it, and they may not speak up. But in the second scenario, the ball is quickly put in the patient's court. Almost immediately, you get the chance to assess their nutrition-related knowledge, which helps you to meet their specific needs in the session. The patient's reply to "Have you ever been given nutrition information for blank before?" dictates how the conversation moves forward. Basically, their response will fall under one of three categories. It will either be a yes, a no, or somewhere in between with an "I'm not sure." If the answer is yes, then the next question can be something like, "What have you learned so far?" Or, "What can you tell me about eating with blank?" Once again, you have the patient talking, and now you're exploring what they know while quietly assessing the accuracy and depth of their statements. If the patient says no, or "I'm not sure," your instinct might be to resort to the comprehensive overview. However, I don't recommend doing that just yet. Instead, I would ask a follow-up question like, have you ever heard that patients with blank need to follow a special diet? Or do you know anyone else that has been diagnosed with blank? These may seem irrelevant at first, yet I find they can keep the ball in the patient's court, forcing them to explain what they know. You'd be surprised at how many patients haven't received nutrition education themselves, but have been exposed to therapeutic diets through family members, friends, and acquaintances. By following this method, you accomplish two major feats. You encourage the patient to be an active participant in the interview, which helps to establish rapport, and you determine the scope of the session. Does it need to be an introductory session where you provide an overview, or can you focus on more advanced concepts even if it's just one or two of them? These are questions that you need to ask yourself as you listen to their responses. Going beyond the beginning of the interview, you still need to know how to ask questions before giving instructions. As an example, let's pretend you're giving nutrition education to a patient with diabetes. You've obtained a record of the patient's usual intake and found that they drink at least 24 ounces of soda per day and eat white bread with their lunch. In addition to this, you've already had a conversation about the need to reduce intake of added sugars and choose mostly whole grains. Here, your intuition may be to instruct the patient to choose flavored seltzer water instead of the soda and purchase whole wheat bread instead of white bread. Don't do it. As an alternative, ask questions like, what could you drink instead of the soda? And what could you have for lunch instead of a sandwich on white bread? By doing this, not only are you allowing the patient to select foods that align with their culture or personal preferences, but you're also assessing what they've learned so far. If you're a dietetic intern, you need to know how to ask questions before providing instructions. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.